Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So the commander for today's Let's Brew deck tech once said, "Life is not a race." And while life might not be a race, ramping in Commander is. And this commander, well, might just be the quickest one out there. But first, a huge thank you to Brandon, who's been supporting this channel as a general tier patron, and I truly couldn't do this without the support from amazing patrons like Brandon. So again, Brandon, thank you so much. And for the personalized deck tech, Brandon chose Archelos Lagoon Mystic, and we're going to take this one in a lands direction. A 2/4 Turtle Mystic that costs 1 black, green, blue. As long as Archelos Lagoon Mystic is tapped, other permanents enter the battlefield tapped. As long as Archelos is untapped, other permanents enter the battlefield untapped. So this is basically a way to either speed people up, especially ourselves, or to slow them down. Obviously, we don't want to slow ourselves down, but basically, if we can control when Archelos is tapped or untapped, we can really take advantage of its effect. So yeah, basically, things that would normally come into play tapped under our control as long as Archelos is untapped, don't. They come into play untapped, so it speeds us up. And again, the exact reverse can happen to our opponents. If Archelos is tapped during their turn, if they're even just putting a basic land into play, now that comes into play tapped. Essentially, everything they have comes into play tapped, so it's going to really slow them down. Now, obviously, this commander can be taken in different directions. It can be taken in somewhat of a stacksy direction if you want to really slow your opponents down and not allow them to untap things and force things to come into play tapped. But the direction that I thought would be slightly more fun than that might just be lands, because again, Archelos can really take advantage of, allowing things to come into play untapped that normally wouldn't. Now, let's start off by talking about some really important lands in this deck, some ones that can be really crucial and really impactful, like Golgari Rot Farm and Guildless Commons. Obviously, there are other ones like these that are going to be in the deck as well, just using these as an example. Golgari Rot Farm enters the battlefield tapped, or doesn't if our commander's in play untapped. And when it enters the battlefield, you return a land you control back to its owner's hand, and you can tap it for black-green. So it taps for 2, it does bounce a land back to your hand, and it does enter the battlefield tap, but it doesn't actually with our commander again. Guildless Commons is a brand new one that just came out, I believe, in Commander Legends. Basically the exact same thing, but it taps for colorless. Again, the more of these kinds of lands in this deck, the better. So basically, again, we can, return one of our lands back to our hand and then just put this in play. And as long as our commander's untapped, we can just tap it right away for an extra 2 mana, which again is huge. Basically just kind of, ramping us just by playing a land. Again, normally they'd come into play tap, but our commander says, no, I'm a turtle. I make things a lot faster and speedier. So there you go. There's also some combos that I'm going to talk about a little bit later that involve these kinds of cards, but just know that Archelos lets us do some pretty cool things with lands because, again, some of them should come into play tap, but Archelos doesn't allow that. Speaking of lands, another land that can really help us out with this commander is Survivor's Encampment. It taps to add a colorless to our mana pool, or we can tap an untapped creature we control to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. So yeah, essentially, this just allows us to tap our commander for free whenever we want, essentially. So yeah, basically, we can just utilize our commander during our turn and make sure that all of our things come into play untapped. And then, during our opponent's turns, we're going to say, you know what, I'd rather have you have your things come into play tap. So my commander's going to tap for mana, and whether I use that or not, doesn't really matter. Basically, our commander is just going to be tapped. Springleaf Drum is another way to do this as well. We've got other effects in this deck that can do it. Again, we're not really going for a stacksy type of deck, but a couple of these kinds of effects that can tap our commander, outside of just using our commander to swing during combat, can be really crucial for this deck. Springleaf Drum, again, is basically just tap an untapped creature you control, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So an easy kind of little mana rock kind of thing that we can get down early. We can tap other creatures, or yeah, we can just tap our commander to really take advantage of that two-sided effect. Next up, let's just talk about some ramp. Obviously, in a lands matter deck, we're going to have a ton of ramp cards, an absurd amount of ramp cards. And again, Archelos really helps us out because when those lands would normally come to play tap with, say, a rampant growth, instead, it comes into play untapped. So basically, it costs us 2 mana for a rampant growth, and basically we get 1 land into play untap now instead of tap, so we can utilize that mana right away. And again, that's basically just, now Rampant Growth essentially just costs us 1. Migration Path, we can either cycle for 2 or get us 2 basics into play tap. But again, our commander says untap. So basically, pay 4 mana, get 2 lands into play, untap that we can use right away. Essentially, this just costs us 2 now. Boundless Realms can be even bigger. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of lands you control, and put them onto the battlefield tap and up your library. Again, no longer tap. So again, let's say that we've got 7 lands in play. Costs us 7 mana to cast this. We just basically double up our mana base for free, which is absolutely absurd again. And we can just use that mana right away. This can even just ramp us right away. If we've got more than 7 lands, we just gain mana for casting this spell. Again, I'm not going to go through all the ramp spells in this deck. There are plenty, though. But we do have other ways to ramp to, like a Summer Bloom. You may play 3 additional lands this turn. Now, normally those lands would come into play untapped anyways, if they're basics or whatnot. But again, if they are those kind of non-basic lands that would come into play tapped, again, our commander can help us out with that. Patron of the Moon is a fantastic card in this kind of a deck. Pay 1 to put up to 2 land cards from your hand into play tapped. This can just ramp us to absurd amounts on its own. It can also combo with certain things. Again, we've got those lands that now come into play untapped that can tap for multiple mana that bounce. So if we've got 2 of those, we can kind of bounce them back and forth. Again, infinite landfall triggers. And speaking of infinite landfall triggers, let's talk about Sakura Tribe Scout. Now, there are, I believe, in this deck, 5 or 6 different types of these effects where basically you can tap and then put a land from your hand into play. And yeah, there's a combo that I've gone through in a couple of other episodes. I believe Tatiova was the very first episode where I talked about this combo, so if you want to see the full detailed version about the combo, go ahead and check that out there. But yeah, basically, combos really well with Retreat to Coral Helm, and again, those bounce lands. Retreat to Coral Helm says, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose 1. You may tap or untap target creature, and scry 1. Both great effects. Obviously, the one that really matters here is that tap or untap target creature, because yeah, we just basically tap that Sakura Tribe Scout, put a land in, from our hand into play. It's that bounce land. It bounces back to our hand. It untaps with the Retreat to Coral Helm. We do this over and over again for infinite landfall triggers. If we've got a Retreat to Hagrid in play, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, choose 1. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains death touch until end of turn, or each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You can guess which one of those 2 that we're going to be picking if we do have that infinite landfall trigger. It's the second one. We drain our opponents out. It would be nice, to have a creature with infinite power and death touch, but you know what? Let's just drain our opponents out and win from there. And speaking of winning, we can also win with tokens in this deck. Maloka the Clouded Mirror can make tokens by paying 1, we return a land back to our hand, and create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with flying. Again, with a landfall deck like this, it's going to be great to be able to bring lands back to our hand so that we can replay them, get them back out. And yeah, just while we're doing that, also just make tokens. And actually, this can be another combo piece with, again, Retreat to Coral Helm and that tapping creature. Again, I've gone over that in other decks, but yeah, basically, infinite 1/1 flyers is never a bad thing. Rampaging Balos, landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under control, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. Yeah, in a deck that really cares about ramping quickly, ramping more, and getting more and more lands out, yeah, getting a 4/4 every single time you do so is huge. And speaking of landfall triggers, we can't pass up Scoot Swarm. Landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. This can get out of hand in absolutely no time. In a deck like this, we can easily get to 6 or more lands, and then as soon as we do, every single one of our landfall triggers makes a copy of this card, and then those make copies, and then those make copies, and then those make copies. It's just, it keeps multiplying and multiplying and multiplying, and yeah, there are just survival rule 782. There are always more Scoot bugs. Very, very true. So yeah, we can definitely overwhelm our opponents with any of these kind of token creators or other ones that we have in the deck. We can also win with something like Sylvan Awakening. Until our next turn, all lands we control become 2/2 elemental creature tokens with reach, indestructible, and haste. There's the lands. Turning our lands into creatures that can smack our opponents. Always a good thing. And of course, in a Sultai deck that is looking to make an absurd amount of mana, Villainous Wealth can come in huge as well. Again, we can just kind of ramp. Again, our ramp spells basically are overutilized in this deck because the lands are going to come into play untapped, so we can really take advantage of that. And then as soon as we kind of get to this critical mass of mana, put all that into Villainous Wealth, then target one of our favorite opponents, and whichever one has the best stuff in their deck. And basically, for those of you who haven't ever played Villainous Wealth, I highly recommend it because it is target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of spells with converted mana cost, X or less from among them, without paying their mana cost. Basically kind of like a Genesis wave, cast everything off the top of someone's library for fun. Yeah, you get the idea. It can be a lot of fun, taking out your opponents with your own things, although they might not find it as fun. It is fun. Anyways, the Golden Pig for this deck, there are a lot of great considerations. I would have to say, though, Tatiova Benthic Druid is pretty hard to beat when it comes to a golden pig for a landfall deck. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Yeah, that is absolutely absurd. Giving you, that padding for your life total every single time a land comes into play. It might not seem like much, 1 life per land, but that can really add up throughout the game, giving you an additional, 10, 20 life, and basically just really padding your life total again and making it really hard for your opponents to kill you. But the more important part, obviously, is drawing a card every single time a land comes into play under your control. Now your ramp cards also have, cantripping abilities, or, basically even more stuff. They're getting multiple lands. And yeah, you're just basically going to be ramping, you're going to be drawing, you're going to be gaining life, and putting yourself way ahead of your opponents with this kind of a deck. Again, you can take this commander in a lot of different directions, but I think it's pretty ironic and funny that you can take a turtle commander whose flavor text is life is not a race into a deck that does want to race and does want to just get an absurd amount of lands out very quickly, and yeah, really taking advantage of the ability to make things come into play untapped that shouldn't. So yeah, that's basically the gist of the deck, though. But if you want to see the full deck list, make sure you check that out in the description below. And while you're at it, make sure you comment below and let me know what you think about this deck. What direction would you take this commander? What cards would you add into the deck? What would you take out? So yeah, let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks again and have a good one.